Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film, Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast.
And I'm Pete Wright, coming in hot with that big Schmidt energy.
Today, we are talking about Minute 106, which begins with the end of Red Skull and ends with the beginning of The Crash. Joining us on the show today, it is one of our favorites from Season 1, Heidi Bennett from Vibrant Visionaries. Hello, Heidi.
Hey, howdy, y'all.
Oh, Heidi, did you pick the best minute?
Oh, gosh. Coming in so dreamy and colorful right here. And you said the name of, was that the director? I had no idea who the director of this was at all.
Oh, Joe Johnston?
Joe Johnston.
Yeah, director of Jumanji and Honey, I Shrunk the Kids and
Rocketeer.
The Rocketeer and October Sky and The Wolfman, a bunch of different things. Yeah,
and most important, especially for this minute, he was on the special effects team for folks like Spielberg and Lucas. And so this is the big indie energy, actually, right? This is like the final scene of Indiana Jones and Melty Face and all that stuff. And it just feels very Joe Johnston to me at this point. I think it's awesome.
Yeah, just before this minute, there was some of that crackly energy that was reminding me definitely of that Melty Face, going into Melty Zone.
Going into the Melty Zone. That's where we are right here at the top of the minute. Yeah, this is where, Red Skull, for whatever reason, in the last minute, he decided, the Tesseract is loose. I'm just going to pick it up. And, he knew better. He's never done it before. But here he's just like, yeah, no, I've got this. And doesn't treat him so well. I don't know if it was he had finally decided that he really did have the power of the gods, only to realize he didn't, and a little bit of his hubris shining through, or if he just wasn't thinking and grabbed it to make sure it didn't fall and get lost or something. But yes, this is where we really kind of get to watch it. It seems kind of like it's eating him away, like it's disintegrating him and kind of sucking him up into space through this kind of space hole that's opened up in the top of the ship, and it kind of looks like the Bifrost from our last story, and it kind of also is a very tropey bit of that pillar of light that is so common in movies around this era, with that beam shooting up into the sky.
I think generally you don't want to be sucked into a space hole.
My husband was saying he was being Heimdalled, so
yeah. The thing about the Tesseract brick at this point is so we get the beginning and it takes Red Skull, it melts him up and sends him, it Heimdalls him, sends him through the space hole. And then it falls on the ground and it melts through the plane.
Let's save.
Do you have a problem with that?
Let's save that.
You don't want to talk about that.
Yeah, let's finish talking about Red Skull and space and all of that.
Okay.
Because yes, there's plenty of Tesseract talk after the disappearance of our antagonist.
Okay.
Because that is a big thing.
Okay.
A big thing.
Yeah.
Heidi, what do you think of the kind of the way that Red Skull is wiped out of the film? Or sucked out, however you want to look at it.
Oh my gosh, I paused it during that, and there's no bad pause. Like every little section is just a beautiful iteration of meltiness and pulling up into the spaceness. It just looks gorgeous. It's the kind of thing that looks like 10, 20, 30 years later, it's not going to be like, these effects are so old, they really show their age. Like I can't imagine that looking better.
It's exciting to see. My favorite bit, which I think is really interesting, well, it kind of has some color shifts in there, which is cool. But when it hits his face, we'd been talking about this, like, what are we really looking at with his face here? Is it some sort of red skin over his face? And as we see it kind of move across his face, it seems to eat away his eyes and his, I guess it is red skin, and it seems to kind of leave an actual skull behind, which is funny because when it does that, I'm assuming just because of the light, but it literally looks like a Terminator skull. It looks like a silver Terminator, like about 6 seconds into this minute. So I was just like, maybe he is a Terminator, and maybe that's what the serum did to him.
Oh my God.
Yeah, and I mean, he's been playing fast and loose with the Tesseract, so it didn't really surprise me when he picked it up because he seems like he thinks, yeah, that he can do anything.
Yeah, yeah.
Do you think he's feeling pain? Like, is that why he's screaming, like, at some point? Or is he just, like, is this more like a transporter? Because we happen to have the benefit of knowing that he, in some form, he ends up somewhere in the future.
Right.
I don't know. The way that it's described is it's kind of a purgatory, which makes it seem like, I mean, he's floating and stuff. It makes it seem like he actually did die.
Yeah.
And is left in some different form. But it's weird. It's like, why does the Space Stone do this to him specifically?
Right.
As opposed to, is it because, like, when the same energy that had been captured and put into those little, peas that the Tesseract weapons had been shooting, those, it seemed to just be disintegrating people, but maybe as we kind of thought, well, is it really just kind of dumping them somewhere in space and these people are left floating in the vortexes of space somewhere? Or maybe they're all on Vormir with him, but it's weird that it acts this particular way with him. And I don't know if it's just because he's holding the cube or what, but it's, I don't know, it's peculiar.
I thought that was strange.
Yeah, and the other thing that happens is, like, it looks like the plane that they're in, it doesn't break apart literally, but like sort of magically opens up for him to fly up too. So there does seem to be intelligence in whatever's happening.
Okay, that's an interesting. So it's like there might be some form of intelligence involved in the Space Stone, and it's like reading his evilness and says, "Oh, we're not just going to disintegrate you. You're arrogant. You think you're one of the gods. We're going to actually do something else with you." It's almost like a judgment box. Is that what?
Yeah, it seems like it. Yeah, maybe it has some ability to discern, I guess, energetically or like whatever.
Yeah.
I was putting in a very
pretty new age.
It's like
I was going to say the Sorting Hat and go kind of all
his vibes. And sorting his
childish and magical, but yeah.
He's slithering up into the.
Well, whatever it does, it is weird, and it does totally fit into the trope that really hit right around this time. This was 2011, and there were a lot of films, it's been going on for a while, but this whole idea of this trope of this beam shooting up into space. And Pete, on the next reel, we had one of these in a film that we had talked about at one point, and I know we did some research, and I think right around this time, one of the, like 2011, 2010, one of these years, there were like 6 or 7 movies that came out that same year that had like the blue beam shooting into space. And, it's just funny that it is such a weirdly common trope, because it's like, I don't know. It's like, why is that a thing? I don't know.
Right. And so do you remember the Blue Beam movies?
I know one of them was one of the movie. I think it was one of the Zack Snyder Supermen movies.
I've got a list of Blue Beam movies, and I can't sort it by year, but the list of Blue Beam movies, a lot of them are Marvel, but Amazing Spider-Man, Atlantis, The Lost Empire, Avengers, Age of Ultron, Avengers Infinity War, Big Hero 6, Cap, Narnia, the Voyage of the Dawn Treader, Chronicles of Riddick has a Blue Beam. Don't forget Dark City. How about The Dark Tower, 2017? Fantastic Four has a Blue Beam. Fifth Element is all about the Blue Beam. Final Fantasy, The Spirits Within. Anybody remember that? Oh, so good. Ghostbusters definitely has a Blue Beam, the 2016 the version of it. Gods of Egypt. Yeah, there are a ton of Blue Beams everywhere. So this goes on and on. Yeah,
it is quite the thing that seemed to happen for whatever reason. And in our favorite site, tvtropes.org, of course, they have it listed. They list it as the pillar of light, as opposed to, I think the reverse is when a beam is coming down to the planet, which I think they call like a sat hit or something like that. But yeah, it is a very tropey thing. I don't mind it. I think it looks cool in context of the movie. I think it works. I did think it was weird at the time. Like, why does this do this to him, but it didn't do this to anyone else that it had, hit, throughout the course of the film? Obviously, it ties into later stories, but it still was kind of a weird thing. But still, it looks really cool. And to that end, I guess in a story where Red Skull, the character, has tied it so strongly into Norse mythology and has talked about Odin and tied into the Tesseract, and it was hidden in a wall behind a picture of Yggdrasil. So at this point in the film, when it opens up space and it does something that seems like Bifrost, and it looks kind of like what we had seen throughout the Thor movie, I guess I don't question it too much at this point, because it feels somehow tied into all of that sort of mythology.
Because we weren't tired of it yet.
Right. But anyway, that's the end of old Red Skull. Heidi, do you like Hugo Weaving as Red Skull? Or should I say, did you like Hugo Weaving as Red Skull?
Yes. Yeah, he was magnificent, and I love him. And I mean, he's been in so many big franchises and everything, and he always brings something spectacular. And yeah, he was great. And just like last month, I was watching this movie again, just as I have Disney Plus. So I'm like, yes, I'm always throwing on these Marvel movies and rewatching them and watching all the extras and watching how they, did the effects for, the makeup effects and everything on him. And it just looks so awesome. And he just seems like a fun, good sport, behind the scenes.
And, he's playing an interesting character. I know we've had a lot of issues with Red Skull over the course of the season because he is often just kind of a mustache twirling villain. But I was thinking about it. It's like, it's actually kind of interesting because, okay, despite whatever we think of the character himself, his role in the film here, he really becomes the linchpin for so many of the following films, because here he's retrieved the Space Stone and introduced it into the story, which becomes a huge thing for Thanos, because that's kind of what wakes Thanos up to, oh, I need to be paying attention to this planet down here. And he kind of sets the whole thing up with Hydra, which of course is going to, infiltrate S.H.I.E.L.D. and become a major story point. So it's interesting that this character and his actions in the course of this film have set up like major story threads that will take place over the next two phases. And I guess I never really thought about that before, but to that end, I'm like, oh, he really is kind of a critical character to where we go moving forward.
Yeah, and I don't mind having him just be predictable in his, mustache twirling or whatever. Like, I don't need every single villain to have like super, deep depth and everything. It gets a little exhausting, so it's like, he looks evil, he acts evil, he is evil, he sounds evil, he's evil.
That's all I need.
That's amazing.
Here, I had a question.
Okay.
So right after he Heimdall's on out of there, then there's like a discharge that happens to the ship, and I don't know what that is. Is that
the space hole closing?
Yeah, maybe. Yeah,
I get. Yeah, it's right around second 11, 12. It looks like when you're watching it, it looks like the Valkyrie just blew up, because it's this huge white light that fills the screen, and it changes the color tone because the Tesseract energy has kind of made everything blue. And then as soon as that goes off, you get that shockwave come out, and everything's clear except for the cockpit, which still has the blue glow for some reason, which is, I guess, the final part of it literally looks like, the closure of something, and then the Tesseract falls to the floor.
Right.
I don't get it. I wish I knew what was going on there, but it's
it's to the same point though. Sometimes the effect is just the effect. You know what I mean? Just because it looks cool,
right?
It's kind of a cool way to close out the blue beam. Maybe that's all it is.
Yeah, probably, because then you see it. You're seeing it from above and seeing that everything looks, besides the one hole that is in like the windshield, I guess you call it. Yeah, it's all complete again.
Right. Yeah, the window, the portal has been closed.
Right, portal.
Yeah. But, Pete, that leads us to the Tesseract, which now falls to the floor of the cockpit I was going to say inert, but I should say it's still glowing blue. In the script, it's actually cracked, which I thought was interesting.
Oh.
We don't see that here. It's just glowing intense blue. And then it does this thing that I never have understood, but it basically turns into alien acid and dissolves itself through several layers of the floor until it falls out of the bottom of the ship. What?
Yeah. What? Why is it doing that? Is it so hot? Is it acid? Is it acid energy? Hot acid energy? It doesn't make any sense. It sends Red Skull up into the sky and it burns through the plane. What happens when it hits the ground? How far? Like, there's no evidence that it will stop. Is it going to burn a hole straight through the planet? Seems like it could. I get kind of fired up about the stupid Tesseract brick heat.
But it does go into the water, so I mean, maybe.
So you think it cools off?
Yeah, I mean,
it's like volcanic
on splashdown
lava. Yeah. Oh my gosh.
I don't know. Do you have a strong opinion, Andy? Like I think you agree with me, right? It's silly.
I totally hate it. Yeah.
Okay.
Well, what's interesting in the script, and again, I keep going back to the script, but I mean that's where they start with too. And obviously they chose to change it because what happens in the script when it falls to the ground and then the plane banks violently. This is how it's written. Suddenly the plane banks violently, its engines roaring. Steve races for the controls. The forgotten cube tumbles across the flight deck. Tink, 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 and flies out a hole in the fuselage.
Tink, tink, tink.
As it was bouncing across the flight deck. But the point is not the tink, 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 but the point is
more about that.
There was a hole in the fuselage that must have been caused when Steve and Red Skull were fighting and had fallen out through a hole that had been made. Now, the only hole that we ever see that they have created in the ship, even though Red Skull shoots at him a number of times, the only hole that's created is in the front window. So I guess that's why they chose to just have it go out this way. But still, it would have made a lot more sense to me if it had found a hole and fallen out that way.
Yeah, me too. Me too.
I mean, Heidi, what's your sense? Do you care or do you like...
That's what I love about doing this with y'all is like, it just never crossed my mind that there was a problem or an issue. Or, of course, it did remind me of Alien and one of my all-time top favorite films of all time, but it didn't feel like now I feel like, I mean, there's always been homages or winks or whatever to other films. And now it seems like they're so prevalent and so referential that it's just like it baked into the DNA of so many movies. And I didn't feel that about it. I wasn't like, oh, here's their little nod to Alien. It wasn't like that. I was just like, oh, that's cool. It did that. I mean, to me, and I'm coming from a place of never read any of the comics of any of these. Like, to me, my entry into comics was the 90s alt comic, Love and Rockets, 8-Ball, Hate, that kind of space. And I really got into comics then. I mean, I was collecting and, reading the Comics Journal and, really into it, but it was all that stuff. It wasn't any of the superhero stuff, any Marvel, it wasn't any DC, it wasn't anything. So I'm really coming in here with no, oh, well, in the comics they did this or these, this comes from this, whatever. So, to me, it's like it's still this mystery blue square that could do anything. And so who am I to say it wouldn't, melt the floor and then just be cooled by going and getting into the ice or the water or wherever it lands. So yeah, it didn't even faze me.
The problem is with all of that is as soon as we hit Infinity War, we get the gauntlet, then why doesn't somebody just put the gauntlet in the ocean? Just cool it off. Maybe it won't work if all of the stones are cold.
Yeah, I guess it's like there's rules, which I understand it's good to have like rules established. But to me, I never really know what the rules of these Infinity Stones are.
Well, and especially because we're at a point in the franchise where you could make the case that the rules are inconsistently applied. Like they weren't quite sure what the rules are yet.
I think you'd argue that they didn't know that it was the Space Stone. That at this point it's the Tesseract. They're probably starting to figure that out. Well, maybe they're figuring it out by this point, because obviously they're tying this very directly into the next film, which does tie into Thanos. So all of it does start connecting. So maybe by this point, as they're creating it, they are starting to have these conversations and thinking, oh, but this could actually be this. Right now, it looked like a cosmic cube, but it could turn into something else. And so I can see them piecing those things together. But even there, it's like when it comes to rules, it's an infinity stone. So, as we've said before, the powers are very ill-defined. It does whatever it needs to do. I guess part of me doesn't like thinking that it's like the Ring of Power in Lord of the Rings, which, as it's described, seems to kind of have a mind of its own sometimes. Is like sometimes it decides, oh, I'm going to fall off of this person's finger because I want to be found by somebody else. Like how that sort of, those elements are set up in those stories. And I don't like the idea where I'm thinking, is the Tesseract conscious in some way where it's going to say, you know what, I need to go hide in the ocean and wait for somebody more important to find me. It's,
yeah.
I don't know. It's sometimes it seems a little weird.
Like giving the Tesseract agency.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I guess, I don't know, I guess I end up seeing the thing, the way that I end up having to read it is that in the process of doing this whole thing with Red Skull, where it disintegrates him, blasts him into space, it did get incredibly hot. I mean, that's, I think, probably what the team decided they were going to make it seem like. It got incredibly hot, and when it fell, it was so hot that it fell through several layers of the ship and then down into the ocean, where it did cool off. I mean, it's the Arctic Ocean, so
yeah,
it's awfully icy and cold. So, that's what they're going for. I can say, okay, sure, I'll buy it.
Okay, all right.
So
I'll let it go for now.
One other thing that does irritate me with it, though, two other things that irritate me with it, though. When it falls out of the ship, I think that they did it in a way so we can see it falling and we know, oh, it's in air now and it's falling to the ground.
Mm-hmm.
The ship is going hundreds of miles an hour and it falls virtually straight down, like so we can continue seeing it for quite a while before it moves out of the hole. If it had actually fallen out of a plane going this fast, like it would have instantly been sucked backward by the force of the air and we wouldn't have seen it. And again, I know that's an incredibly petty thing. And I know they probably just left it there. So, we can see it's tumbling into the air, but it does bug me that it's falling in a way that it shouldn't.
But maybe it's super, super celestially heavy. So it flies completely parallel with the flight path of the plane?
Okay.
God, I don't know.
All right. Here's the other thing that bugs me.
Stupid movies.
What is Steve's goal here? Is it, I mean, obviously he's in this huge plane that we know it has bombs on it and it's heading for New York. I mean, and obviously he got on it because he was trying to stop Red Skull, but I don't think his intentions were necessarily to get the Tesseract. Like he may not have known it was on here. So is the Tesseract not, because he doesn't go after it. And that was something I was thinking is that something that would have been more important to go after? Do either of you have any thoughts on this? Like, was the Tesseract, should he have known that, I need to stop that more than the ship?
You do wonder. Like when he picks up his shield, why doesn't he dive out of the plane and get that Tesseract? Or does he just think, there's no way I'll ever find it? I mean, it's falling straight down and parallel to the plane. He'd probably fall right along with it.
It's still right under me. Yeah. As I continue flying, it's flying too. I don't know. Do you wonder, Heidi, at all, like Steve's goal here? Like is it just to stop the plane?
Yeah, I mean, rewatching these minutes and questioning these minutes.
The curse of the show.
It reminds me of Finn. Okay. It reminds me of Finn in The Last Jedi when he decides on Crate that he's going to fly his little thing that's like, it's kind of like tethered to the ground in the way it has like a little rudder, and he's just jamming really fast and he thinks he's doing something really heroic, and then Rose knocks him off course and he's really mad because, it would have killed him, but supposedly saved, everybody.
Everyone,
but
right.
Her logic is, like, hey, you don't need to do that. Like, yes, that's very heroic looking and very dramatic. And, you know, you could be a martyr or whatever, but I'm paraphrasing. That's not what she says at all. But like, but
It was nowhere near as sophisticated as you're saying it right now.
but she's just like knocks him off course and is like, you know, we can do this another way. You don't, it doesn't have to be a sacrifice. This overarching theme of like, we can do this with love and figure out a way and go as a team and, you know, whatever. The long and the short of it, you as the single hero, that doesn't have to happen. And so I was kind of thinking of that with this, where I was like, really, is this the only thing that could happen? Like, if he's in the Arctic and there aren't there other resources? Can't we figure out something? Or can he look around and say, is there a parachute on this ship? Like, he doesn't seem like he really goes through steps of possibilities.
At a minimum, are there no other soldiers, like no other military units that can catch up with him? Like, I don't know. That gets me. Like, it feels like there should be more planes by now. All right, enough.
Yeah, well, let's save a lot of that conversation for tomorrow's minute, because we have a lot more of the actual conversation between Steve and Peggy about all of this sort of stuff. So at this point, it's just Steve trying to figure out, like, what am I going to do here? But he doesn't go after the Tesseract. He's like, who needs a little blue glowy box?
Yeah.
It's brought nothing but heartache. Let it fall. That's basically what he says. So I guess now what the movie is setting up for us is through a very convenient targeting map that is located in the cockpit. It shows the target of New York City, and then the targeting map whip pans across the top of the globe to show us where the plane is. I'm like, that's a really handy targeting map to work like a camera, like a movie camera, and do this whip pan for us. So here's New York.
It's in cinematic mode.
Yeah, right. I wonder if it just does that. Like every 5 seconds, it whips back and forth between, this is you, this is your target, this is you.
Totally. 100% that happens.
Very strange. But anyway, I guess that's it, right? This plane. Okay, the plane is headed for New York City, the Valkyrie. On the plane, there were 8 of these Fliegerparasites, these little mini planes, these drop planes, that are the bombs, right?
Mm-hmm.
One of which was going to New York City.
Mm-hmm.
Now, we've also seen at the very end of this minute, we get a shot to the kind of the schematic of the Valkyrie, where it shows red marks where I guess they're bombs, where there are the 8 little drop planes in the back, 2 of which are gone. We saw that happen last week. But there are still 6 of those drop planes in the back of them, presumably all armed in some capacity. Not for New York, because that one took off and actually Steve crashed it into the back of the Valkyrie.
Yeah,
and
it's
then
back in the Valkyrie.
It's back in the Valkyrie. Not flyable, but it's back. And then there are those 2 images on either side of the Valkyrie that I assume are meant to be bombs, although maybe they're the engines. I'm not sure what they are. And so I guess, I don't know, the question is, like, why is the whole Valkyrie going to New York? If one of the drop planes was scheduled to go to New York, like, was that, I guess I'm not exactly sure what Red Skull's intentions were. If he already had a drop plane targeted for New York, was he still going to take the whole ship to New York? And then what was the end goal? To just kind of crash it into the city?
That does seem foolish now that we're talking about it. Why doesn't he go for fondue?
Did you? Yeah, really.
He passed that hours
ago. You guys talk about the real America bomber planes that were never actually made, but were like this, that were supposed to be able to go from Germany to New York?
Yeah, we talked about one of the, I don't believe it was specifically the America bomber, but I know which one you're talking about. But it is one of these flying wings that had been kind of the basis for this thing that would kind of fly over here. But yeah, I mean, did you do some digging on that? Maybe you should tell us about that, because that might clue us in.
I mean, honestly, no, I didn't. I just looked at it on Wikipedia, but I didn't read through anything except for that there were various proposals put forward, but the plans were eventually abandoned as being too expensive, too reliant on rapidly diminishing material and production capacity, and or technically unfeasible. So just like a myriad of problems, but that's all under the America bomber, which the fact that what was supposed to be able to go all the way to New York, I was like, okay, well then that's what it's doing. It's going all the way to New York. I don't know why. Yeah. I don't have an answer to the question except for that.
It was the Horton H-16 or 18, I guess, the Horton H-18 that we had kind of talked about, which was a flying wing that the Nazis had designed. But yeah, as you said, they never ended up actually building it. And that is the one that was kind of patterned for this particular ship. And it's, to your point, I guess if that, again, in a movie that is often tying kind of these real world plans and things that had been, set in motion with things that are happening in the movie, inevitably, I suppose that's probably why the Valkyrie is flying to New York, because that's what this particular bomber had been designed for. It doesn't make a ton of sense because it also has all these little drop planes that are the bombs. But in the scope of what they were trying to accomplish, I guess that's what they were doing. I don't know. I struggle with it, though, as I think about it.
Well, and in the last minute, we learned that the little sub-bombers can fly faster than the Valkyrie. So by the time he gets to New York should be, for all intents and purposes, useless.
Yeah. Maybe he was going to land on the rubble and
have a triumphant moment of acquisition.
Right, have a triumphant takeover.
Okay.
Right, this is mine now. Maybe that's what it was.
Okay.
But still, okay. I don't know. Steve doesn't really know much. And I think that's the key that we have to remember is Steve is in this plane that is flying and, he is from New York. He sees New York as the target. And so I suppose if we have to look at it as a character who is making very quick decisions with very little information, I suppose that's what we have to go with these next couple minutes, right? I mean, Steve has never, as far as we know, he's never flown a plane before. Here he is now flying a plane. He doesn't seem to have a sense of the tech within this plane, so he's just kind of guessing as far as what he can and can't do. And I don't know. I guess that's kind of where we sit with things. That's the only thing I can really go after to kind of figure all this out. But because I guess the worry is, although this wasn't a worry when Steve dropped the drop plane before the pilot could hop in and the drop plane fell probably over Germany, he wasn't worried about that blowing up when it hit.
Right.
So is he worried about the plane getting to New York and the bombs going off, or is he just worried about the plane crashing into the city? I mean, it's a big plane. We know that. I mean, do you have a sense as to why this is a concern for him? Well, and I guess I'm asking because I'm assuming, and I think we have to assume, that Red Skull did something to the plane that makes it hard to go off course, although it doesn't seem that hard, but still.
Right. I mean, it's either on autopilot or it's not on autopilot, right? Yeah, I don't know. I just figured his thought is, I need to put this thing down because it's gonna hurt my home simply. And this is him throwing himself on top of the bomb or the hand grenade, right?
The grenade, yeah. This is making good on that promise of his patriotism and courage. Well,
yeah, I end up getting very frustrated with the end of this film because it starts feeling incredibly written. And I think this is something that Marvel does suffer with especially, I start feeling this, I'm really feeling it a lot in Phase 4, where things feel written just to set things up for later stories. When Steve has to set this plane down in the ice, it's like, oh, well, we have to have Captain America frozen for a whole bunch of years because we need him to come out in 2012 so that he can help the Avengers stop the Chitauri.
Right.
But we're going to be talking about this all week because I have so many nits to pick about other things that Steve could have done instead of just crashing into the ice.
And the fact that nobody starts to make the case at all that, Steve, wait a minute. I know you're not a pilot, man. Like, this is what I want to hear on the radio. Steve, slow down. Slow down. You're at a 12. I need you at about a 6 because we can solve this problem and you could actually live through it. And let's go ahead and do that. Like, there's none of that. It's just like Steve is going down his patriotic duty and we know where it's going, even starting at this minute.
What's that? There's a parody movie, and I'm not going to be able to tell you which one it is, but I know there is one where it's a character who is like this, and everybody is just like, oh, no, we just need to flip this switch. No, I'm going to have to do this. I have to sacrifice myself. And everybody's like, but you don't, because we can just do this thing. But this person is like so dead set, like, written in such a way that they have to make this sacrifice, even though all these other characters are presenting options about, no, but we just need to flip this switch. No, goodbye all. It's like one of those parodies. And I feel when I really watch this film, especially minute at a time, I can't help but feel like Steve is that character. Like, he just can't not make these calls when there are so many better ways to handle things. And I don't know.
I'm going to be right in the middle because I feel like I also am frustrated by that when we do it 1 minute at a time. But I'm also on Team Heidi in that when I watch the end of this movie, just not a minute at a time, I love it. I actually am quite fine with it. Like, it's like pulling it apart is what breaks it for me. But the act of not pulling it apart, it's okay. I like Cap. I like who he is. I like that he's making this sacrifice for whatever reason. Maybe he has information I don't know. And I do know, to your point, we need to get him in the ice. That's lore. We got to find a way to get him in the ice.
Yeah.
Well, the other thing that crossed my mind, too, was that he's not just a human, right? He's got extra strength and power and everything. And maybe he thinks... he also feels like, well, let's just see how invincible this body that I'm in is. Maybe I'll survive this crash because we don't know, like, as much as we don't know about the Tesseract, I mean, we don't know really.
He doesn't know about himself.
He doesn't know about himself. So maybe, but I do get that in the way it is written. And as we move into the next minutes here very soon, I'm sure over the course of the, next few episodes of the podcast here, is that it's also nicely set up that this, goodbye that, and a kind of, but with a promise between him and Agent Carter. Well, future Agent Carter.
Well, it's certainly not a promise with Jim Morita, who gets shoved out of the way.
Yeah, he's host.
It's like at least they let Morita on the radio. I mean, that is his job after all. It's like, oh, all right. Well, to your point, this has been a long episode, so let's put a pin in it. We'll come back because we've got a lot to talk about with all of these plans that Steve has and what Agent Carter is trying to get him to do. So let's stop here, and we'll talk more tomorrow. So, Heidi, first question for you: have you bought that ghost town that we talked about?
Oh, the ghost.
We did an Iron Man episode.
No, but I would love to do something like I would love to have like some property where I could host people to, unplug and get away and
right.
Eat really good food and have some adventures in nature. I think that would be really fun. So
that would be absolutely. All right. Well, tell everybody where they can find you and what you're up to out there on the internet.
Yeah. So vibrantvisionaries.com is the place you can get the podcast where I talk with indie filmmakers, people in horror, sci-fi, cartoonists, artists, all sorts of just sort of quirky weirdos. And we talk about creative process or whatever their latest interesting project is. I've covered a lot of film festivals. And so, there are a lot of filmmakers and a lot of film making process and people who have been in Marvel and Star Wars properties and such. So you can find that at vibrantvisionaries.com. And there's also the new YouTube channel. The link is there as well. there's some of the interviews are on there, and then also started a cooking show, and I'm adding other cooking shows and other shows in the future. So if you want, like, mine is Vibrant Kitchen, and it's just like super simple, easy recipes with like something vibrant and spicy and delicious, in it. And it's just been really fun. So that's what I've been working on lately. And I actually work on that with David Smith, who's another Movies by Minutes person.
Awesome.
Well, check all of that out, everybody. And thanks so much, Heidi. And we'll be back tomorrow to talk about minute 107. So, Pete, thanks as always.
Close your eyes, Andy. Don't look at it, Andy. Close your eyes.
Until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.